Several wildfires broke out across the state this week. Many of them were ignited by accident. But some of this week's political fires in Texas politics, well, they were set intentionally. Fox 7 Austin's Rudy Koski and our panel of political analysts break it down for us.
Some of the political fights that we saw this week in Texas politics were political cyber warfare. For example, Senators Cruz and Cornyn posting on social media throughout the week. They took shots at the Biden administration's recession denials, as well as the Democrats' new tax hike that they call the Inflation Relief Plan. There was also a lot of tweeting about efforts to save the computer chip bill. Some very unsocial media punches were also thrown between the chairman of the Texas GOP and the spokesperson for the Texas Democrats. Governor Greg Abbott, his migrant bus trips to the Northeast, getting the attention of mayors of New York and D.C., both crying for help this week. And a state house committee held a contentious two-day education hearing about just as students are about to return to school. Now, let's get our headlines for the week from our panel, and we'll start first with political analyst Mark Wiggins. Mark, what's your headline for the week?
Well, with vouchers in the air, Texas schools hang in the balance.
Brian Smith with St. Edward's University. What's your headline for the week?
Recessions are like obscenity. You know it when you see it.
And Holly Hansen with the online news outlet, The Texan. Holly, what's your headline for the week?
Word games don't alleviate economic pain.
And let's start off a little bit with this political cyber warfare that's going on. Brian, it seems like instead of running ads, everyone's going to social media. How long can this last?
Indefinitely. Social media has no overhead. It's fast. You can be as nasty as you want to be as long as you're within the character limit. So we're going to see this go all the way through Election Day, into the session, and the foreseeable future.
I think a recent Pew Research study showed that about 23% of American adults are on Twitter, but that gets amplified in our media. Now we even run stories just based on what politicians say on their Twitter feed.
We're in the doldrums right now. If Congress is headed to recess, very few people are actively campaigning. And really the only ones paying attention to politics right now are folks like us.
We've got some political word gamesmanship going on in regards to, are we in a recession or not? How does this play out? Do you feel like the people really care how you define it, Holly?
I don't think so. We can play all the word games we want, but the reality is most Americans, poor and middle class Americans, are seeing what's happening at the grocery store and at the gas pump.
It is the economy, stupid, and recession or not, if you're able to spin a bad economic message against your opponent, it can work. We think about 1992, we were out of that recession, but President Clinton was able to use that all the way up through Election Day, and it worked.
These are nerds debating nerds. What people care about is that gas prices are going down. That's good. But inflation is still high. That's bad.
Brian, the governor's migrant bus trips initially just didn't seem to be successful. But now all of a sudden, the mayors of New York City and D.C. are crying for help. Is it sticking out? Is that issue really hitting home now?
Anytime places like New York or D.C. say it's a bad thing, that's more ammunition for the governor.
And we're showing the rest of the country that it can be difficult for them to manage as well. It's reality.
A House committee held a two-day hearing on education. They were kind of split up, but both issues very contentious. Mark, you attended those hearings. What struck you the most?
What we saw this week that I think was noteworthy was really the opening salvo in the battle over whether Texas is going to keep a free public education system.
And I think there's a correlation there with the interest in expanding school choice in the state of Texas. They're more interested now in looking at other ways that they can empower parents and give them options when they're choosing the best education for their own children.
And we're seeing the battle lines being drawn right now. And like Mark said, we see some of how they're going to break down with vouchers, with school choice, teacher shortages, CRT. All of these things are going to be on the agenda, and we're going to hear about it day one of session.
And with that, let's wrap up this week in politics with our one word, and we'll start with Mark Wiggins. Mark, your word for the week.
Vouchers.
Brian, your word for the week.
Wildfires.
And Holly, your word for the week.
Gaslighting.
And with that, we're wrapping up another week in Texas politics.